All right, so let's travel back to 2006 when WikiLeaks was born out of Julian Assange's radical vision of transparency. He wanted to create, a groundbreaking global platform that bypassed traditional media. The idea was simple, really. Leaks would come straight from anonymous sources and straight to the public. Pretty bold, right?
Absolutely. And what's fascinating is how Assange wasn't just thinking about journalism, but about ethics, justice. He believed that shining a light on hidden truths could help bring about accountability, even justice. And here's the thing, he didn't just dream. He did it by building WikiLeaks from the ground up. Initially funded through donations and media partnerships, it was all about independence.
And independent it was. Like, WikiLeaks didn't have to worry about pleasing advertisers or governments. That's pretty rare.
It is. But independence alone wouldn't be enough. Assange brought together people who believed in this mission. Take Kristin Hrafnsson, for instance. He later became the editor-in-chief. And Sarah Harrison, she played a massive role too, navigating both the tricky ethics of publication and the dangers that came with it.
Right, they didn't just publish sensitive information. They worked to make sure it was responsibly handled. That was part of the whole philosophy, wasn't it?
Precisely. They wanted to protect their sources and their audience. This was key. WikiLeaks actually emphasised anonymity. Unlike traditional media where sources sometimes take risky, public stands, they built a fortress of secrecy where whistleblowers could come forward safely.
And their first whistleblowing projects weren't limited to one country. It was, sort of global from the start. They exposed corruption in Kenya, shifty government actions in Europe, even intelligence leaks from the Middle East. They had this ambition to unearth stories traditional outlets might not dare touch.
Oh, and don't forget one core difference. WikiLeaks published almost immediately. No months of red tape or editorial back and forth, which meant fast transparency. But you see, it also stirred up criticism. Some argued there wasn't enough curation or vetting of these leaks before they went live.
So you've got this fearless approach, a global reach, and a commitment to protecting sources. Then you mix in high stakes and controversy. It's no wonder WikiLeaks quickly made headlines.
Building on that fearless and controversial reputation, WikiLeaks made headlines again in 2007 with one of their most explosive releases, the collateral murder video. Have you seen it? It's shocking to say the least.
I have, and honestly, it's unlike anything I'd seen at the time. Just think, this footage was from a US helicopter gunship in Iraq, showing the crew opening fire on journalists and civilians.
Yeah, it's bone-chilling. I mean, watching it unfold, you can't help but feel this enormous weight. It forced people to see, in no uncertain terms, the realities of modern warfare.
Right. And the global backlash was swift. On one hand, you had outrage directed at the military's conduct, which WikiLeaks uncovered. On the other, there were questions about whether releasing this video in its raw form was, responsible.
That's such a tough call, isn't it? You've got transparency on one side, but also the question of the fallout. I mean, this release really highlighted how WikiLeaks wasn't afraid to take on powerful institutions. But sometimes maybe they didn't fully anticipate the consequences.
Exactly. And that's something we see again later, in 2016, with those DNC email leaks.
Yes, I remember this vividly. It was just before the US presidential election. Talk about timing, huh?
Oh, very deliberate timing, no doubt about that. These emails revealed how the Democratic National Committee had essentially worked against Bernie Sanders during the primaries. It shook public trust, and not just in the DNC, but in the electoral process as a whole.
It was massive. And let me tell you, I remember, and this is just personal, seeing the news break about the leaks. I turned to a friend, and we both just sat there, stunned. It was like, whoa, did that really just happen? It made me realise how much power WikiLeaks had to disrupt, even shift public opinion.
Yes, and that disruption didn't just impact the DNC or Hillary Clinton. It echoed with voters and political institutions. And, unsurprisingly, it led to debates about, integrity. of both the political system and WikiLeaks itself.
And that's the thing, yeah? While WikiLeaks sparked this idea of government accountability, actions like these also blurred some lines. Like, at what cost does transparency come?
So, that idea, at what cost does transparency come? It's a complex question, isn't it? And it leads us right into one of the most debated aspects of WikiLeaks, the criticism they've faced over the years.
Not at all, and much of the criticism centres around their handling of sensitive information. You know, the unredacted releases, those exposed personal details like social security numbers, and even information about suicide attempts. That kind of stuff raises serious concerns about privacy and accountability, doesn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, transparency is one thing, but when you're tossing out private, vulnerable information, some might argue it's crossing a line. And then there's the whole issue of perceived bias, particularly during the 2016 US election. That's when WikiLeaks really got accused of playing politics.
Right. That's where the objectivity of the platform came into question. By focusing so much on Hillary Clinton and the DNC, they stirred up accusations of being partisan. And let's not forget the broader fallout. Questions about interference in elections and even alleged links to Russian intelligence. All that didn't exactly help their reputation.
No, it didn't. But you know, what really gets me is how much of this revolves around Julian Assange himself. He's not just the creator of WikiLeaks. He's become this symbol of the fight between government secrecy and freedom of information.
That's an important point. Assange has faced legal challenges almost from the start, from sexual assault allegations to extradition battles and eventual charges under the US Espionage Act. His situation has kind of become a proxy war for larger debates about press freedom and whistleblowing.
Yeah. And then there's the whole banking blockade thing, where companies like PayPal and Visa, they just stopped processing donations to WikiLeaks under government pressure. That practically crushed their funding. I mean, how do you keep running an organisation like WikiLeaks when 95% of your income disappears overnight?
It's a monumental challenge, and yet WikiLeaks soldiered on for years, even as they faced operational roadblocks and public backlash. But all this makes you wonder, were they losing sight of their original mission as they tackled these external pressures?
Exactly. And that brings us to the core ethical question. How do we balance the need for transparency with the realities of national security and personal privacy? Like, where do you draw the line for whistleblowing?
That's the crux of it, isn't it? Transparency is vital for holding power accountable, yet it carries risks. Lives can be endangered, and trust can be eroded. And without clear rules, it almost feels like a double-edged sword. I mean, we rely on whistleblowers to reveal corruption, but we also expect them to act responsibly.
It's a tricky balance. But, you know, it's fair to say WikiLeaks changed the game. They amplified this whole idea that regular people, whistleblowers, can take on the most powerful systems in the world. For better or worse, they redefined how we think about transparency.
They did. And whatever opinions people hold about WikiLeaks, it's clear they've sparked an ongoing conversation about the role of information and accountability in our society. The question now is, what comes next? How do we build systems that are transparent yet careful, revolutionary yet ethical?
A lot to think about, isn't it? And on that note, I think we'll wrap up here. Thanks for being part of this journey with us today. Let's keep challenging ourselves to ask those big questions and to learn from everything WikiLeaks has shown us.
Absolutely. And let's hope the future brings more clarity, balance, and accountability for all of us. Until next time, take care.